Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to unbox and offer some initial impressions on Enemy Action Kharkov, the second game in the Enemy Action series designed by John Butterfield and published by Compass Games. We'll unbox this, give some impressions. We're also going to offer some thoughts on how this might be similar to or different from Enemy Action Ardennes, the first game in the series. Let's jump in and get started. So what are we looking at? Well, Enemy Action Kharkov is the second game in the Enemy Action series, and I know a number of people who consider Enemy Action Ardennes to be one of the best, or if not the best, solitaire experiences in tabletop wargaming, with literally an active enemy AI to work against you. And of course, Enemy Action Ardennes, centered around the Battle of the Bulge. This one centers on starting on the 1st of February, running up to March 14th, 1943, with Popov's thrust to take the city of Kharkov, and then Manstein's counterattack to retake the city and to thwart the Soviet advance. So let's take a look at the back of the box here. Good heft to it. In essence, too, I think one of the things to realize about this game is that you've got 3 games in one box. Now, this is a 3-inch box. I think it would leave plenty of room, looking at the components, to add counter trays and to get everything back in the box here. Some of the overview figures of it. We've got a medium complexity here. A 2-player game is listed as a 5, and solo is listed as a 7 out of 10 for both the Soviet solo player experience and the German solo player experience. This feels comparable, if not a little bit lighter, perhaps, than the Enemy Action Ardennes ratings. I think with the Enemy Action Ardennes, one of the solo experiences is rated an 8 out of a 10. Time scale, 1 turn is 3 days. Your map scale, 7.5 miles per hex. We've got regiments, brigades, and divisions. Very suitable for solitaire, of course, 10 out of 10. It is designed, in essence, the core, the pinnacle of this game, perhaps, is that solitaire experience. Now, there are 3 scenarios in the game. The first scenario covers the initial Soviet thrust. It's only the first 2 turns of the game. The average time to play lists that one as 1 hour. Then there's a 6-turn scenario that counts the first 18 days, if you would, of the campaign. And then the full campaign game here listed as 12 hours. And again, we've got over 400 counters in this box. 12 hours covers the 14 days, up to 14 days of the full campaign if the game does not end before that. So with that in mind, let's open up and start playing around with some of the things inside. And I will say that, kind of looking through the rules a little bit here overnight, those ratings feel about right, maybe 7 or 8 for that solo experience. But the 2-player experiences, which is where the game rules recommend you start, it says play the 2-player experience by yourself or with somebody else first to get a sense for how the rules of the game work, and then add in the rules for the solo experiences. So we've got a lot in here to look at. First, we've got some promotional material for Compass Games. I'll put that off to the side. Baggies, we love the baggies. Nice to see those in there. And a single 10-sided die. We'll move those off to the side. One thing I want to talk about too, a very nice touch before we dig into the game itself. Now I cut this paper in half because I'm going to move this, but Enemy Action Ardennes errata cards. So there are 12 cards in here. So if you own Enemy Action Ardennes, you can replace those cards with these, and then that game will be up to date. So a great touch, figuring perhaps that many people that have this game have Enemy Action Ardennes, or many people will have Enemy Action Ardennes after they buy this game, perhaps too. So there is one errata listed in the box here as well. We're going to come back and take a look at these 2 card decks later, because I want to start jumping in a little bit to the rule books. Now again, going back to that concept of there being 3 games in one box, there are 3 full rule books in this. And so we'll take a brief look at these. Each one 8.5 by 11. The 2-player one is the simplest of the lot. It's 26 pages here before you get to a couple pages of designer notes. So we're looking at, say, 28 pages in all. Full color, slight glossy paper, great examples, and I'll put some looks up there again of what they look like, covering all the components of playing the 2-player game. And I kind of started reading through these last night. They look very straightforward. Looks like the 2-player game being rated a 5 out of 10 feels about right, and I'm excited to get started with that for learning the system. Then this is where the fun starts. So those cover basically the mechanics of the game. Then you have 2 separate rule books, the Soviet solo rules and the German solo rules, to cover the rule set and the mechanics and the actions of the other side when you're playing. For example, if you're playing as the Germans, you're going to play the German solo rules, which is going to give you all the information for how the Soviets are going to act, and vice versa here. If you're playing the Soviet side, you're going to use this rule book. Now, these are hefty rule books. We're talking 43 pages here for the Soviet solo rules. Again, this is covering how the German AI works in this game. And I'll come back and talk a little bit. I think we can see enough now, after having looked through this for about an hour or so, to make some comparisons between how these two games might play out and how this might compare to Enemy Action Ardennes. But very thorough. I mean, I've played a number of John Butterfield games right now, and I think there's a certain inherent complexity to them, but there's also an inherent clarity to the rules. It really covers all of the cases and situations. Very thorough, very detailed, superbly written. My greatest experience with one of his games is a D-Day at Omaha Beach, and I just love the thoroughness of that rule set. This feels like the same type of work, which of course is why I've really enjoyed playing his games. I think we can take complexity that's well explained in a thorough and detailed fashion is really just a joy to work through. So a lot of stuff here, again, to kind of sort through how the Soviet solo rules for the German rules, and then likewise the German solo book, if you're playing the German side, is 51 pages. Lots of examples of play. Same thing, going into detail on how to act and how to move around as how the Soviets are going to move and how you'll be moving your forces and things like that. So. Here we go. That's good for the rules. Let's take a look a little bit more in here. We get two. This is a Soviet command card display, and then you get a train effects chart for both sides. So rather straightforward. I'll show a close-up on the train effects chart there a little bit. And then for playing German solo, we get the same two cards. So when you're playing German solo, these two would be face up. Playing Soviet solo, then these two cards are face up. So rather straightforward there. Now let's take a look at the counters. I feel like my counter clippers days might be getting numbered. I'm seeing more and more games with pre-rounded counters like this. And I think this kind of goes in line with kind of a general direction that Compass Games is taking to kind of upscale and upgrade the components that they're offering in their games. We have 4 counter sets here, all of them double-sided. These are 5/8 of an inch counters. They're all pre-rounded, so easy to pump out, and they're actually very easy to take out. I know a couple of them have fallen out. I've been just kind of handling them a little bit here too. And what we're looking at now, these white and black ones, I believe, are the AI counters to dictate. You're going to pull these to determine some of the actions for the AI when you're playing against a solo opponent. We've got various markers here, and again, a whole nother counter set of markers, some game directional markers as well, frozen. So lots of fun stuff. Full color, looks really good. High quality, easy to handle, big print, nice and easy to see. More AI counters here, but let's take a look. Now we're getting into the German forces here. There are separate army groups as we're dealing with. So the Germans are divided up into 3 groups, and the Soviets are divided up into 2. And that dictates where units can move and where units start and how units can act. Here we can see a lot of German armor here coming through. Second side, there is a step system in the game as well. So looking through these. And then lastly, the massive horde of Russian forces here. So we've got, again, here we can see some of those coming out. No problem. I mean, it's just that they're going to come out nice and easy. They're not like dropping out all over the place here. More German forces down the bottom, and then we can see NATO symbols for the infantry, and then armored tanks here for the armored elements of it. And a lot of armor in this battle, of course, one of the classic Eastern Front battles here. So we can see the 2 Soviet groups here, the darker orange being one and the lighter orange being the other. So these look fantastic, really well done. Easy to punch out, very high quality counters in there. They're excited to play too. They're coming out already here. So then we take a look. We've got a series of 5 player aids here. And I'll go through these relatively briefly because these are, I think it kind of ties in with that idea that this is a game and kind of in line with a lot of Butterfield's work where you've got a lot of detail. Everything's thought through, everything's accounted for. And these are player aids that kind of selected out from the rules a number of different guiding steps to help kind of guide you through the game after you've read the rules and are getting a handle on how to play. We've got 1 sheet for 2 players. This is combat tactics and events, combat procedures, key rule summaries, and then the train effects chart and miscellaneous. So there's 1 of these for the 2-player game, and then we have 2 each, 2 for the Soviet solo game and then 2 for the German solo game. And again, just kind of looking through these. I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but we've got, again, key rule summaries. So the idea, these are the things that you might forget, that you might want to remember. Soviet activation steps, so how you're going to handle the Soviet movements, activation 1 and activation 2. So very thorough. Again, you're looking at an entire AI system for 2 opponents in 1 box. So, this, and we'll talk a little bit, I think, as to how this works out, how it might compare to Enemy Action Ardennes, but just I can't imagine the amount of time and thought that has to go to kind of predetermining how an enemy is going to operate in a tabletop board game in a way that works. So I'm very excited. I mean, the telling sign, right, is how's it going to work when you play it, of course. But very excited to give it a try here. Combat tactics, combat procedures again, and then command events and special events. So we can see that there. Now let's come in now and take a look at our cards. The player experiences are all on their own card sets now. So we have 5 different decks, and I'll kind of put them out here. We have Soviet Player Command. We have German Enemy Command. So this would be used when you're playing Solitaire as the Soviet player. Then we have Soviet Enemy Command. That would be used when you're playing Solitaire as the German player. Then we have German Action, which comes German Action cards, which I'm guessing that their operations are a little bit more complex, perhaps. So we've got a set of German Action cards, and these are used when you're playing Soviet Solo. Then we have German Enemy Command more, so we can see how this starts to work out. German Enemy Command here. That completes that deck, and then German Player Command. So when you're playing 2-player, you're going to use the German Player Command and the Soviet Player Command. When you're playing as the Soviet Solo, you're going to use Soviet Player Command, the German Enemy Command, and German Action. And when you're playing the German player, you're going to use German Player Command and the Soviet Enemy Command. So each deck is identified and separate. You don't have to parse the information for each one of the games. They're not all blended together on one set of cards. They each have their own kind of stacks of cards. Beautiful color. Lots of different explanations. I love the color elements. And again, everything kind of detailed out how to play. And I'll show a close-up on one of these too. You can see here this 1 to 3 and 4 to 7. One of the things that has been done in this game is that not only is the AI designed for the battle, but the AI has to be designed for specific parts of the battle. So in turns 1 to 3, this is what you do. In turns 4 to 7, this is what you do. And a lot of the AI components in this game are built that way. So certain actions happen at certain segments of the game, and the AI is going to shift and adapt as the game progresses. So really interesting to see how that was. But these are fantastic. Lots of color. I'll show some close-ups on a few of these as we go through. But lots of different variety. Of course, it creates a lot of different depth to the game when you see these cards come out, because each game's going to be different in terms of how the actions move forward and how the gameplay progresses. Now let's take a look at the maps. Again, 3 games in the box, so 3 rule books and 3 maps. Now these are all 22 by 34 inch maps. So we've got 3 of them. They're paper, thick paper, so they feel pretty good. Probably want them under plexiglass. And this is probably a good time to talk a little bit about. So we can see this is the 2-player map, and this is basically what you would expect in almost a traditional 2-player game. And we'll see a difference. I'll show a close-up as we get into some of the solo player maps. But here we can see the city of Kharkov, and I'll show some close-ups of these two. Lots of white and snow around, so of course befitting of a February to March battle in Russia. So beautiful maps, looks really functional. I mean, there's a lot of open terrain here, as you can see, lots of wide open spaces. And I think that is what has caught my eye of interest as I read through the designer's notes a little bit. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But here, let's take a look now. Second map, this is the German solo map. So another one here we can see now, when I pull this one out, we can see the triangles, the straight lines, the blocks. This is going to basically, kind of AI instructions for how you're going to coordinate and move the Soviet forces. This is the German solo map here. And again, we can see just a layering. This is, if you've played the D-Day series, you can see this layering of enemy information and activity and movement information throughout the map. So the map really becomes almost a flow chart of how these units are going to be moved, while at the same time keeping it rather kind of clean and an effective visual format here too. So love the maps, look great, just really kind of bring you in. Let's take one last look then at the Soviet one, and then offer up a couple of thoughts as to, it's hard until you come in and play it, like how's it going to be different from Enemy Action Ardennes, but I think I can offer a few thoughts on it. Here we have the, whoops, that's a little bit of noisy there, Soviet solo map. So again, same kind of elements here, triangles dictating play. And in this one, I noticed that we have numbers indicating German positions, and I don't yet quite know how those work in this rule set. But so the subtle differences for how the Germans are going to be handled in this game. So again, 3 games in one with 2 completely independent AI systems over a core rule set. I can only imagine how long and how much playtesting must have gone into this. That brings us to the end of everything in the box. Now, one of the things that caught my eye, one of the questions I have is, how does this compare to Enemy Action Ardennes? And it was really interesting reading through the couple pages of designer's notes, because it sounded like John Butterfield came at this with the idea of, if he moved out of kind of the dense combat situation of Enemy Ardennes, where you've got terrain and road blockages and bridges bleeding out and bridges being blown up and troops flowing down probably established channels where there's easier movement. His idea was take a situation that's less complex, kind of wide open, Russian farmlands that you're going to see in this battle. And he found that worked out really well for the two-player situation. But then that simplicity of terrain creates an extreme challenge when you're trying to design AI, because your enemies can go in almost any direction. So how do you design a system that's going to be able to handle that freedom of movement and have it happen in a logical and effective way? And I think that is what, kind of thinking of this as start to dig into this, that to me seems like both the question that I have of this game is, how well does that work, right? This is a completely different type of battle, and it's clear that John Butterfield has approached this with a completely different approach to the AI, tweaking it, making it work, getting it to be functional in this type of environment, which is a very different task than it would be in Enemy Action Ardennes, where, again, the combat and the movement tends to be channeled along some easier pathways of movement, and you've got bridges and things like that functioning there. So very different tactical environments, very different situations. And how does the game function in those places? So that's both the challenge I would ask of this game, is like, you got to play it to see whether that's going to, how that's going to work. But it also answers the question of, is this basically the same? Is this Enemy Action Ardennes 2.0? And I don't think it is, because this to me seems like there's been an incredible amount of revisions, reworking, rethinking how the AI works to handle this unique battle and be very different from how Enemy Action Ardennes is going to play. There's also some other elements that are talked about. For example, in Enemy Action Ardennes, the units are distinguished by unit quality, green versus elite, whereas here he's made a distinguishing between the command quality, effective commanders and rather ineffective commanders that were present at the battle. So lots of subtle differences, but I think that the open and flowing nature of this is really going to challenge that system that was designed in Enemy Action Ardennes, and I'm really excited to dig in and play it to see how it holds up and compares to that system. So there you have it. Let me know if you have questions. Have you picked this one up? Are you a fan? Are you looking forward to it? I look forward to reading your comments down below. If you have not seen our unboxing of D-Day at Omaha Beach, another Solitaire John Butterfield game, I'll put a link to that here. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.